Hi folks, I'm Jack Kennedy. Welcome to a special Teagasc and ICBF webinar on breeding. I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew Cromie from ICBF, Trevor Dunwoody, a dairy advisor up in the northeast, I'll say, Trevor, and Mark Cassidy, farming in Meath, County Meath. Right folks, our topic for discussion is, I suppose, genomics and daughter proven, and maybe teasing out some of the issues around selecting genomic sires or daughter proven sires, etc. So Andrew, I might kick off with you first, then I'll move into Trevor and we get a feel for what's happening with some of his discussion groups and some of the farmers on the ground, and then we'll move into Mark and discuss a little bit about, I suppose, what Mark is doing and some of the kind of issues that he sees around the whole daughter proven genomic side of things. Andrew, if I start with you, I mean, you've done you in your work with ICBF, you've done a good exercise over the last number of weeks and months, I suppose, liaising with discussion groups, having the chats around daughter proven versus genomics, what's working, what's not working, and like, I mean, there are big questions, or there were big questions, there still are big questions around genomics. Is it still the way to go? Is it really picking out our best sires? I think I've lost Andrew there. While we're waiting for Andrew to come back in, Trevor, I move to you. I mean, you were part of that discussion in terms of Andrew and his. Yes, I suppose, Jack, I mean, so we did. Trevor, I'll stay going with you, and we'll try and get Andrew back on a kind of a stable link. Andrew showed you, I suppose, some of the numbers in terms of your discussion group and what was happening and the usage of genomics versus daughter proven.
Yeah, so look at we had a number of group meetings with ICBF there over the last month, Jack, and on average, in my area, about 70% of bulls used were genomic, with the remaining 30% daughter proven, and overall about just under 10% were actually the young G1 bulls. So a significant move towards genomic sires and the use of the young G1 bulls. I suppose, moving into that and looking at that, the important issue, Jack, is to use a good team of bulls to offset any risk with the genomics, in terms of any potential changes in the genetic ranking. On average in my area, the teams of bulls are up at 9, and look at that's what we'd be targeting. A minimum of 7 bulls for herds up to 100 cows, and that'll be doubling then, where larger herds up to 300 cows would be looking for double that in terms of up to 14 or 15 bulls. And of course, within that, then absolutely critical to use even number of bulls, and that's one area that I'll certainly be focusing on. In my area, the top used bull was still coming out around 28-29%. Which is fairly similar to the national average. I know maybe some groups there was a range there from maybe 20 up to 35 or 6 in my area. So look at it, it's one area that's absolutely critical to try and get the even use of bulls. Jack.
I mean, that's a big challenge, Trevor. I'll say, if you have a bull that there's 30% of them being used, I mean, if something happened, that bull, either in terms of conception rate or in terms of numbers changing, in terms of EBI or a trait changing, I mean, that's a big challenge for that particular herd. And as you said, so I mean, while the number of bulls was 9, they could have been using 30% of one of those 9, which is a big challenge.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. So look at that. That's my that's one of my particular big issues now for this year, next year, is to smooth off that, Jack, and try and promote more even use of bulls to offset any risk with any major changes in any of those genomic bulls.
Okay.
It improves the reliability of the team and offsets any risk.
Yeah.
And look at, on average, in my area, the teams of bulls average around €250 in terms of EBI. And when you go into, that level of EBI, you're going to be drawn towards the genomic bulls, Jack. So, in order to source the team. So that's where we're at.
Okay, I might come back to you again in a minute, Trevor. Andrew, I think we might have you back on a better link. I was just talking to Trevor about that exercise that you did with ICBF and Teagasc, with all the advisors, with all the discussion groups around the country, and kind of what the objective of it was, etc., and that kind of thing. Maybe just give us a little bit of background to the exercise that you done, Andrew, and we've heard some of the results there from Trevor.
Yeah, Jack, we met with 100 groups, about 1,000 farmers in total. And, it was one of the big questions that came up from the groups, from the farmers, the participants, was this really around the genomic versus daughter-proven discussion and question. And I suppose a lot of that maybe was on the back of, we've had some significant improvements in genomics over the last 12, 18 months that we've introduced. And certainly they created some fluctuation, some changes, and that prompted a fair bit of discussion. And hence it was probably the big question that came up in the context of the groups. And I suppose we were very keen then to get out with a positive message around the changes and the improvements, but also to remind farmers that, the genomics as a technology is working. Like, if we look at year on year and go back the last 5, 6, 7 years, and if we look at the the heifers that are calving in on farms, that on average, consistently, they're coming through with on average a 20 EBA point ahead of, we'll call it the daughters of the daughter proven bulls. And, that's €40 of profit per lactation. So it certainly gave us a lot of confidence and give the farmers a lot of confidence that, yes, genomics is a technology that continues to move us in the right direction. Yeah. I suppose one other key point in that was that the farmers that are using daughter proven bulls, they're going up as well. That's the key point here. I mean, we're making genetic gain as an industry, but if you're focused on EBI and teams of bulls, like Trevor said, then you'll invariably be drawn a bit more towards the younger genomic bulls because they're 3 years ahead of where the daughter proven bulls are at.
Yeah.
So that was a key point we just were trying to get across.
Is it fair to say, Andrew, that some of that, I call it, questions around genomics was based around how they were used in terms of the proportion of genomics in that particular sire? I mean, we had that debate last year in terms of the capping of genomics in the particular sire. Maybe just give us a bit about, like, that wasn't an ICBF problem or an Irish problem. That was a global problem. Am I right there? And just tell us where that is now.
Yeah, so... And obviously what genomics is doing as a technology is using the DNA to try and identify these, so additional information to try and identify these better animals. But the big change that we brought in there last year was to bring the cow proofs into the training population. And that certainly gave us more confidence, allowed us to more accurately identify these superior animals. But the one challenge with the cow proofs was their lower reliability. So there's a level of additional error in there. And what we did find was that when we used the cows in the training population, they pushed the young genomic bulls a bit too high. So we had to pull back. This was the capping that you referred to, pull back on the influence of genomics, but absolutely confidence that as a technology, it's certainly adding significantly to new information to help us to identify the really better bulls. And that's reflected now, obviously, into, well, we see, first of all, in terms of the trends that I just talked about, but also very confident going forward in terms of the new bulls that are going to come forward this year, next year, as we continue to make the improvements, Jack.
Andrew, I touched off it again briefly with Trevor, but we talked about that's all very fine if you're using genomics and young bulls like they're supposed to be used, even across the team, and one sire used the same amount of times as the other sire. I mean, Trevor was given his numbers there where one sire was used in 30% of the times, or 30% of the time, so it's a high proportion of one bulls, while they picked 9 or 10, they used 30% of one sire. That's one of the big dangers of that technology.
It is. And that was one of the key reasons why we obviously were doing the sessions with the discussion groups. The figures, in one hand, it's good in the sense that farmers are using teams of bulls. They'll use 8 bulls, but the big problem there is that 30% of the calves are then to one bull. And invariably, they're drawn towards the higher EBI bull, the genomic bull. And, if that bull comes back, which invariably, all of these these outlier bulls, they're more inclined to come back a wee bit. That's going to cause consequences, obviously, in terms of the farmers breeding this, in terms of the group of females that he's bringing in. So the key point about this technology, to really get the best out of the technology, is about equal usage of teams of bulls. And that was a big emphasis of the discussion group sessions.
I mean, there's no way of controlling that, Andrew, is there? There's no way of putting a limit on, per farmer and like that. Like that's a piece between the AI companies and the farmer, I presume, yeah.
It is, and our role in that there, no different with working with Trevor there, is really to to guide farmers and to make them aware of the consequences of overusing one bull. Like, you know, farmers have got the message around AII. They don't use stock bulls. They understand that one stock bull is, his proof could drop considerably, and you're taking too much risk. It's the exact same principle with teams of bulls. Like, and we're in Cheltenham week this week, Jack. It's betting one horse in the race, or they betting 4 and 5 horses in the race, and it's the exact same principle.
Trevor, just coming back to you, I mean, that's going to be one of your big challenges. So for this year, in terms of getting through to farmers, that listen, 30% of any one bull is not good enough.
Yeah, that's the big goal now for the coming breeding season, Jack, is to get that message out there. So look, we still pick the team of bulls, so large teams of bulls, 7+, as I said, up to 14 with the largest herds. And look at by utilising the likes of sire advice from Herd Plus, run the sire advice. That will identify the bull one, and try and, aim to get the farmer and the AI technician to stick with bull one. So, if we can do that, it certainly will help the situation, and hopefully it will help to smooth off that peak, as I call it, of the one bull peak, Jack.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Right, so clear messages. Mark, I mean, to bring you into the discussion, maybe first of all, just to tell listeners and watchers, just tell us where you're farming, number of cows, where you are in calving, if you're still calving, or probably all calf at this stage.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, we're still calving. We start a little bit later up here. Just milking 390 cows this year. That's the plan. It's a crossbred herd, all spring calving.
Okay, talk to us, Mark, about I know from liaising with you down through the years, you have a big interest in breeding and just in terms of how it works and obviously using it for your own farm, etc. Talk to us about daughter proven and genomics in your head and how you see it sitting.
Genomics or daughter proven doesn't really come into my head at all in selecting bulls. I'm looking at the figures exclusively. I'm looking at health traits, management traits, and now TB data is coming in as well. And I'm looking at fertility and milk.
But Mark, I'll hold you there. I'll say if you're looking at, I call it the high EBI sires, they're predominantly, I'll say, genomic. Is that fair to say? So you're obviously downgrading the weighting on EBI as a trait and moving it into other bits and pieces. Am I picking that up properly?
Yes, yeah. It doesn't come into it at all that whether an animal is daughter proven. I don't look to see if she's daughter proven or genomic at all.
Okay. Talk to me then. So in terms of and so you have no issue with it. Am I hearing that properly? Like, you have no issue if it's daughter proven, well and good. If it's genomic proven, you still believe in the science and you still believe that they're selecting the best bulls. Yeah.
And most of the bulls we've used in the Navan group are genomic and have been genomic for quite a few years.
Okay. Because I should have said that. Like, I mean, you're part of the Navan discussion group, and you have obviously lots of discussions. I've been part of lots of discussions with your discussion group about breeding, etc. So I mean, there is good knowledge in the group. But Mark, talk to me about what you just touched off in terms of the trait selection and how you put emphasis on. You're talking about maybe putting more emphasis on health and maintenance, and you even mentioned TB, even though it is at a very kind of early stage in the whole cycle of selection. Yeah.
Sure. If you listen to a lot of people, all they talk about in selection bulls is milk and fertility. There's very little emphasis placed on the other sub-indexes. So when I'm selecting a team of bulls, I look at the smaller sub-indexes first, health and management. And then I look, this year we're starting to select out bulls that are high in the worst 40% for TB. So that we just to make, like you said, make a start on it. These are the traits that are going to be more important in the future, I believe. Also, there's then I select on maintenance, because we are generally a crossbred group, and we want to keep cows in around the 520, 550 range. Some are bigger, some are smaller. But there's an awful lot of bulls that are coming in that have very low maintenance figures, like less than 10. And those animals are going to it'll be a challenge to make them work on herds like ours. I think people are sleepwalking into a herd of large cows. I think that's potentially going to be a problem down the road.
Andrew, can we pick up on that in terms of the maintenance piece per se, like we'll say, and that challenge that Mark says in terms of some farmers are maybe sleepwalking into it because they're selecting all, maybe I just say all genomics, all with, you know, a maintenance issue that's going to have bigger cows. Is that a challenge do you see coming down the line?
Well, it's not a challenge certainly for Mark, because he understands, and the group, they understand where they're at currently, and they understand the type of cow they want. So Mark is very clearly, you know, he talked about a 520 to 550 kilo cows where they want to be from a NAV and group perspective, and they're probably going to be sitting in that sort of 20 to 25, 30 maintenance sub-index. You know, that's where they're sitting at, and they clearly are picking a team of bulls then that are, their goal is to hold that maintenance sub-index. Am I correct, Mark? That's your sort of, when you talk about your team of bulls, that's what you're looking to do. Mark is also right in terms of the sleepwalking piece, is that I think one of the challenges we've certainly seen is maybe that the maintenance sub-index almost became the new EBI for a period there, or at least amongst some farmers, and they were just focused on the maintenance sub-index because they wanted a smaller and more efficient cow, and they didn't really understand, you know, where they were in terms of their own herd, and as a consequence, cows got, you know, invariably got too small, and there was the consequential challenges around, you know, the whole discussion around beef and calves and all of that. So there's one end of the continuum, and I don't think you want to be there. And similarly, Mark has identified a point. There's another end of the continuum, and we certainly don't want to be there. It's nobody's best interest to have cows that are too big and cost too much to keep, and the related challenges. So I think the key one that we would send to farmers is understand where you are with regard to your maintenance sub-index, and understand that in the context of the size of cow that you want for your herd. And that's going to be somewhere, Jack, between 520 and 580 to 600 kilos, depending on the...
So if I'm picking you up properly, Andrew, if I'm picking you up properly, it's that, as you say, you don't mind someone using maintenance as a trait and using that within, but keep it, don't stay going down the maintenance line.
Absolutely.
That you need to broaden it out.
The key point, it's because it's one of these traits that has we call it an intermediate optimum. You know, there's an optimum somewhere in there. You go over the shoulders, and you're really starting to challenge either cost of keeping the cow on one side, or alternatively the beef and the challenge with calves on the other side. That's
okay. Mark, I mean, coming back to that, like, I mean, and again, just getting back to I suppose we're here to talk about kind of, I suppose, the sire selection. I mean, how do you do it as a group, and how do you do it, and just talk to us about kind of incorporating not just maintenance, a few of the other parameters, and how you kind of, you know, work through that process.
How I do it is it's all done on spreadsheets, and I basically is pulling the data together is the hardest part, because getting all the data from AI companies, they all give a selection of data. They don't give the full picture. No company does. So it's a matter of pulling that together and then just selecting out on different traits. Picking a figure. What I try to do is I look at the herd, and I look at what bulls do I need to, or what kind of traits I need to use for all the sub-indexes to have this ideal cow. So in back to maintenance, to maintain the maintenance at its current level, we can't use anything that's too big. But the same goes across protein percentages, kilos of fat, protein, all those things. To make an improvement, and in fertility as well, to make improvements, you have to know what your ideal cow is, and then select a team based on that.
Yeah, now, I just coming back to Mark, I suppose, in terms of if you put too much in the pot, is there a danger that you'll kind of end up with nothing? You know, as in, you know, if you start selecting on all the different traits, you know, and trying to get thresholds in all of those, you know, cutting out one sire because he is too high in EBI, cutting out another one because he's too low in maintenance, is there a chance that you'll really narrow down your potential pool of sires?
Absolutely. That's the whole point of it, is to narrow down the pool of sires.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the pool of sires gets too small, then you have to reevaluate, and you have to broaden your criteria, and not be so selective. But on the health and management traits, there's no leeway on that. They have to be at least positive. if not strongly positive. And with the TB, we're not prepared to, I was discussing it with some members of the group, we're not prepared to accept anything below average.
Okay. It's interesting, Andrew, just to come in on the health piece, like, I mean, are we confident enough in the numbers that are there on the health piece to put such emphasis on it as Mark is putting on it?
Yeah, look, and I think, look, it's a really interesting point that Mark has made. You know, as a group, a couple of really important points. The Navan group, and we did the exercise with the 100 groups. I mean, in terms of teams of bulls, you know, I talked about the average is 8. I think the Navan group were up at 16 or 17 bulls. So they're using teams of bulls, but also more crucially, their max to any one bull, and Trevor had the figure of 30%. You know, their max to any one bull was 15, 16%, you know, and that was right consistently right across the group. So it goes back to, you know, I'm supporting the point there that Mark was making in terms of their preparedness to use teams of bulls and then not overuse them. I suppose the key point I would pick up there is the focus now on the health and disease traits and TB. I mean, it's very definite that, you know, with the whole discussions around AMR, you know, and linked to cows on farms and linked to carbon and climate and the environment and all of that. I mean, certainly these are the traits that are going to increase in economic value in the future. I mean, female fertility will always be the really important one. But again, for the likes of the Navan group, they've got their fertility sub-index. You know, they're right up at the top end in terms of that fertility sub-index. They're getting the 6-week calving rates up at, you know, as a group, it's 85% mark or 84% or in and around there, you know. So they've got that compactness, the female fertility piece. So for a group like the Navan, it's about maintaining, holding maintenance, holding fertility sub-index, okay, continuing to look to improve that, but then about maximizing then the new traits that are going to be important in the future. And they've identified those as you know, health and disease traits and TB is a new one there.
Question just in on that, Andrew, on the TB in terms of where the TB index originates. You know, what figures should we target in terms of the TB, or where's the data coming from on that?
So it's actually coming from the Department of Agriculture. I mean, that's a new bit of data and a collaboration agreement that we have with the Department of Agriculture. It's part of the TB eradication program, the overall. So now genetics is embedded in as part of that, which is a very significant and positive development. So that's the evaluations are done on that basis in terms of the likelihood of a bull having progeny that are going to effectively break down with TB, and we're able to give them a ranking. An EBV and a ranking for all of the individual animals. So sires, active sires, young bulls, genomic bulls, it's all available there now as well.
And is there a target figure yet, or is it you know what?
The best way to use it is like what Mark has said. He talked about, you know, there's a percentile there. We haven't done the economic value work yet, Jack, to actually bring it into the EBI. So that's whenever you would have a target figure, you know, in terms of an economic value with the but at the moment, you know, Mark has talked about the percentile rank, so he wants to screen out bulls that are, for example, below average on that TB trait.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. I mean, in terms of health and TB, I mean, obviously Mark is in at the deep end and he's a real interest in it. In terms of broadening it out into your discussion groups, like, is there that much of a focus yet on health, I suppose, as a trait and TB as a trait for selecting sires?
Yeah, certainly overall on the health, Jack, like that would, you know, there'd be a big focus on health, you know, around somatic cell count, mastitis, lameness, massive focus on that, similar to what Mark was saying there. Like generally, you know, groups are targeting, you know, they have to be at least positive, you know, trying to eliminate the bulls that are negative on the health trait. So yeah, look at, answer to your question, yes, there's a big focus on the health and management traits. So generally trying to target bulls that are positive on those. And look at, yes, it will narrow the pool slightly, but there's still quite a significant pool of bulls if you eliminate those with negative figures for negative sub-indices.
I mean, Jack, if I could come in there, and I mean, with the benefit of having Mark here and obviously talking to Trevor in the context of groups, we should still appreciate that female fertility is the number one issue, you know, on dairy farms, you know, for our 6-week calving rate as an industry. Let's not it's still at 65%. It's not at the 85% that the Navan group or the, the 75 to 80% that Trevor's groups would be at sort of, getting up towards now. So for the vast majority of dairy farmers out there that are making breeding decisions this year or in the next number of weeks, it is still female fertility. You'll get the milk solids, high EBI and teams of bulls and obviously not overusing individual bulls.
Okay, I mean, and Andrew, again, we're coming close to the summary side of this kind of session, I suppose, specifically on this. I mean, again, your kind of one-liner message or your simple message is that if you're using genomics, you're going to make progress. If you're using daughter proven, you're going to make progress. But the big message again is to use teams of them because you will get change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the genomic versus daughter proven got into quite a divisive, commercial, more almost semen selling type of discussion, as opposed to like what Mark says, we shouldn't get caught up on whether it's genomic or daughter proven. If the bull ticks the boxes, he's doing for me, doing what I want in terms of the traits that are important for me. Well, then, we should use that bull. Invariably, using teams, then you'll be drawn more towards the genomic bulls, and that's the 70% of the calves born this spring are by the genomic bulls. I think for the Navan group, it's up at 80%. For Trevor's group, it would be at that sort of 70%. You'll be drawn towards the genomic bulls. The key point is use them as teams and use them equally.
Mark, to finish, again, just in summary, I mean, is your selection, as you say, predominantly genomic sires in the Navan group, is the performance matching up? I mean, are you getting conception rates, are you getting, I suppose, calving rates, I suppose, that are matching up to improving fertility with those genomic sires?
Yeah, fertility is improving and production is improving. There's no, I don't have any problem with genomics at all.
Perfect. Trevor, and just again, a kind of a summary line. I mean, again, one of the big challenges for you said as an advisor working with your clients and working with discussion groups is to spread the risk and use the teams.
Yeah, spread the risk, use the teams, and look at, I suppose, overall, and it's come through there, for each individual farm group, identify any strengths or weaknesses, discuss the objectives with the farmer, and then select a team of bulls to meet those objectives and try and address the weaknesses. So look at, as Andrew said, fertility, milk solid still key. Yes, you can look at the others as well and bring the whole package together. So look at it, it's important to, still focus on any particular weaknesses and discuss the objectives with the clients and with the groups, Jack. So
excellent. Okay, Trevor, the best of luck with the groups this year and the farmers. Mark, the best of luck with the rest of the calving and again with bull selections as you. Andrew, you're going to stay with us for our second session. We're going to start straight away now into our second session, which is focused specifically on sex semen, and we're going to be joined by Stephen Butler from Teagasc Mark, Don Crowley from Teagasc in West Cork, and again David O'Gorman, a dairy farmer who has used sex semen, I suppose, and he's going into his third year of using sex semen. So thanks to Trevor and thanks to Mark for sitting in on that short session. We could have spent a lot more time talking about it, but I think the clock is against us. So Stephen, thanks for joining us. We've had a session on genomics and daughter proven. We're just going to have a quick chat now. Again, we only have a half an hour, so I suppose we can't do everything on sex semen, but maybe just give us a feel for, I suppose, some of the trial work that has happened in this space and kind of maybe some of the new trials, etc., where it's going.
Yeah, very good. So in 2018, we did a large field trial, 140 herds, over 8,000 inseminations conducted. And half of those inseminations were with conventional semen, half were with sex semen, and neither the farmer nor the area technician knew which was sex, which was conventional. All of the inseminations were after detected heat, okay? So it was kind of up to the farmer to identify cows in heat and decide when to put them forward for insemination, but nobody knew if they were getting sex or conventional. All the straws were handled and treated the same way. And of course, on average, the conception rates came out at roughly 60% for conventional and roughly 50% for the sex. So that's where it's at, right? It's that 10% gap, and that was an average figure across all the herds. But what that's hiding, of course, is the fact that in some herds, sex semen was really poor. Like, I mean, you're talking about conception rates of 20% or in a handful of herds even less than that. So a really poor performance. And on the other hand, you have some herds where sex semen was actually better than conventional. So we tried to think that maybe part of that explanation is that just the decision rules on farm around timing of AI. So as another study was planned for 2019, And in that study, all the cows were synchronized. So it was a smaller study. It was about 2,200 inseminations on 24 herds. And David's herd was one of the farms that participated in that trial. So in this study, we tested 2 different timings of AI, but the real objective was to control the timing of ovulation and, at the very least, avoid very early inseminations. So again, in that study, overall, with conventional semen, conception rates of around 60%, sex semen around 50%. So you're still in that same territory, right? And again, there was a handful of herds that did better with sex semen than they did with conventional, but we certainly had a handful of herds that did poor with sex semen. So in that circumstance, where everything was controlled, cows were assigned to treatments, balanced for parity, balanced for days in milk, how do we still have all these differences, right? So and every herd had the same mix of every bull, right? So there's only three bulls involved. Every herd had the same mix of every bull. And you know, when you start looking at this, you kind of wonder, well, is there more to this, specifically on the day of AI? Like, is that a big part of it that we haven't looked at heretofore? So you know, some of the herds that did really well on it, you know, there was very particular technicians and good protocols, following procedure, very meticulous in the details being conducted. So that's our current advice now, is, you know, you got to be very careful in terms of picking your bull team. Pick a team, just like Trevor was saying. You know, putting all your eggs in the basket of 1 or 2 bulls that you like is not a good way to go in general, and it's particularly not a good way to go with sex semen, because some bulls will have a big drop off in fertility, and you just don't know who they are until they start repeating. So picking the team of bulls, pick your best dams, you know, for heifers, the best fertility cows, you know, maybe do a cutoff at parities 1 to 4, at least 50 days in milk on the day of AI, good body condition score, cycling, free of postpartum problems. So that's something you can do now. You can pick the target animals now. You can pick your bull team now. When the breeding season starts, the timing of AI is critical. And I think there's been a general realization of that. If you're doing it after observed heats, you want to do a bit later than what you're normally doing. Okay, so you know, 14 to 20 hours is the recommendation, and there's a reason for that. And the reason is that these sex semen straws, it's a damaged, more fragile product. The sperm that are in there have gone through a damaging process, and what you want to do is deposit that semen in the reproductive tract as closer to the time of ovulation than what we normally try to achieve with conventional. And that's no simpler way of putting it than that. So if you're worried about calving pattern, synchronization is something that will mitigate that. So if you get all these cows that you want to use sex semen, use it on day 1. That increase in submission that you can achieve has a big impact as well. And then of course on the day of AI, you know, just real attention to detail, realize that it's a fragile product, and handle it more carefully.
So Stephen, to cut a very long story short, are we suggesting that the conception rate to sex semen is always going to be that little bit lower than natural service or normal conception rate to AI? Is the science, is that where it is at the moment? Because there are some claims by some companies that we're up there, you're almost equal to kind of normal AI or conventional semen. I mean, are you, from your trial work, I'm hearing 10% reduced conception rate.
Yeah. So that's certainly the average situation. Yeah, the average is across all those studies. Two fairly large cohorts of herds, a 10% reduction. Within that, there's huge variation. Some herds doing just as well, some herds doing really poor. So there's a lot of it is down to the farm and you know, the actual the management of the animals, the timing of AI, the straw handling. If you do all that right, you're going to get closer to conventional. You know, it's unlikely that you can reliably expect that every year sex semen is going to be equal to, and certainly unreliable to think that it's going to be greater than conventional with the current technology. Okay.
And Stephen, again, I'll finish with this and I'll move on then to Don. I mean, in terms of herds, would you suggest that if you have a very poor fertility herd to stay away from sex semen? Because invariably, some of those are the ones that are looking for a lot of heifers because they're short heifers because they have poor conception rates normally anyway. Like, I mean, but if you have a poor fertile herd, should you stay away from using sex semen?
Absolutely, yeah. It's not the answer. So even though they're seeing a particular need for heifers, in herds with poor fertility, and that could be a combination of genetics, it could be a combination of management, it could be lots of reasons for poor fertility. But when you have poor fertility, the relative performance of sex semen is poorer on those herds compared to herds with average or good fertility. So there's things to be fixed, and if you have poor fertility with conventional semen, it will only be poorer with sex. So fix the things that are problematic first, and then and then start thinking about sex semen.
Okay, brilliant. I come back to you, Stephen. Don, in terms of your working with clients and working with discussion groups right across West Cork, much of an interest in sex semen, I suppose, historically, and maybe bring us into 2021 in terms of what the thinking is now?
Well, definitely, Jack, there was a lot of talk about the sex semen, a lot of interest. Did they bite the bullet afterwards? Not really. The uptake was quite poor. I suppose really the big thing, as the lads have outlined, is we've hit the 6-week average now for most fellas now, and they'll know whether they're under 70, 80, 90%. And they've worked so hard to get it, they're so afraid to lose it, because it just takes so bloody long to get it back if the thing goes wrong. Yeah. I suppose the other thing that has come up too is the teams of bulls that they've been able to pick from has been quite tight, have been quite poor. And some of the lads that have been on it have found that their EBI has stayed static. They haven't been able to lift it because the selection of bulls. And when the lads are going on about teams, that's where the real team comes in the sex semen. They depend so little on a small team because the EBI is low. Then they really get caught when it goes bad, And that has caught them a bit. I suppose, look, the lads outlined there, the technician is a huge issue there. And I suppose what some fellas that have been on it, they've been looking at the cows that have historically gone in calf with one AI. They've gone after those cows if they've gone down the cow. Now, the heifers is the main one. But on first, second, and third parity cows, they'd look, she went a calf, first whip. So they'd be primarily the ones to get from.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Look, it's there's an appetite for it. But.
There is. And Don, I mean, in terms of how it might be used, like, do you see it being used as a kind of a piece, like get your heifer calves in the first week, 10 days, and then go beef, like, or how might it be used in terms of that sire selection piece, assuming you had a good team to select from?
Yeah, I think the real one will be after the heifers. So my best EBI stock, so I'll have a heifer off a heifer early, which means she'll calve down at a decent size of 24 months, which is what farmers want, because as they all know, heifer off a heifer is a small calf, but she has the time to come. You won't notice her in 2 years' time. Yeah. That's the real win that fellas are after on it. And you're dead right. If you get a great uptake on the heifers, I don't need to do as many cows. I can pick my best cows and then beef them out then from then on.